since I have done a video, and I've got a couple for you this week. This one's really focused on what we're working on in terms of the This I Believe speeches. I'll have another video posted for you either tomorrow or Friday, sometime before the end of this week, with more kind of general information about our class. So let me dive right into it so that I don't waste too much of your time. Today we are looking at the structure of these This I Believe speeches. I hope that these first couple of days you kind of enjoyed digging into some of this content. I'm really excited about how we are ending this year. This was the plan even before the school closure, so we're really not changing much here, which is great. And I think this is just a really wonderful way and really kind of a great time for us to be having this conversation and thinking through some of these very personal reflective pieces that we're taking a look at. So when we talk about the This I Believe speeches, and I want to emphasize that what we are working on are speeches. I know that in the material that you were looking at in the slides, hopefully on Monday, you saw that they're equivalent to a personal essay. It's the same thing, it's just different formats or different means of presentation. So the content is the same, the expectations are the same. We're just changing up the way that that information is presented. And just so there's no surprise, I am going to be asking you to write your own This I Believe speech next week. So that's why we're really kind of taking this deep dive this week and looking at some examples and looking at the structure of how these are put together. So the structure is really pretty simple. This is not going to be anything super surprising or different or unique. It'll make a lot of sense to you. But I just want to take a moment to go over that with you so that you really are understanding how they are put together. So the This I Believe speeches contain 4 main parts. You've got your introduction, your story, the impact, and the conclusion. Okay, so we're going to look at all 4 parts in a sample essay. I'm actually going to have Ms. Tyner jump in a little bit with a sample essay for you guys to take a look at as we're going through this. But those, just so you know, those 4 parts don't necessarily have to come in that order. I think obviously it makes sense if your introduction's at the beginning, the conclusion's at the end. But the story and the impact can be kind of interchangeable, and this is more of a creative style of writing. So you are not necessarily stuck writing in a very formulaic way. You can have fun with it. You can be a little bit creative. You can explore different ways of communicating your ideas. If it makes sense to maybe infuse your introduction with a little bit of the impact or a little bit of your story just to kind of create some excitement and interest, that's fine. You're going to have a chance to play with that next week. Okay, but just keep that in mind that as long as you have these 4 different components somewhere in your speech, then you're doing this right. Right? So the very first part is the introduction. The most important thing in your intro is that you state your thesis. And for the sake of a This I Believe speech, your thesis is your belief statement. So this is where you just say, I believe, and then fill in the blank with whatever it is that you are focusing on. Now, I'm not asking you to capture all of your beliefs in this one speech. What you're doing is you're isolating just one, and you're really focusing on that one belief. Okay, so you're going to make that statement, I believe, in your introduction. Okay, of course, that's not all that goes into your intro. You'll get a chance throughout the rest of this week to review other This I Believe speeches to get an idea of different types of introductions. Again, this is super creative, so you can approach it however you see fit and whatever makes sense for you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the sample with Ms. Tyner to see how this particular student chose to do their introduction.
There is such a thing as absolute truth. That means that on a given issue, when people believe opposite things, somebody is right and somebody is wrong. There may be no way to tell at the moment who is who, but that doesn't mean that everybody is right. And because objective reality can't be proven in the moment, contradictory beliefs can't both be right, and therefore absolute truth exists.
Okay, so when we take a look or when we listen to this particular speech, the author of the speech gives a reason for her belief within the introduction. You can do that, that's totally fine, but it's not necessary. You don't have to take the time to explain the reason in your introduction, because the bulk of your speech is going to really kind of give us the foundation and the reason for that belief that you hold. So as long as you communicate it somewhere else, you don't have to include that in your introduction. It's your call. Okay, so now let's move on to the story. The story kind of encompasses, I would say, the biggest part of your speech. Now, if you remember on Monday, when you read about the background of this, I believe, speeches, you saw, I believe, on like the second slide, that they're meant to be about 500 words and no more than about 5 minutes when recorded. So they're not very long. For the purposes of our speech, because it's creative and because I want you to have the freedom of expression to really get your belief across, I'm not going to keep you within those parameters. If yours ends up being longer than that and you need the space to do that, that is fine. But also know that you have the freedom to make these pretty concise if you would like to keep it kind of straight to the point. That being said, the story takes up the majority of the space of your essay. In a typical, or your speech, excuse me, in a typical This I Believe speech, the story would be roughly 2 paragraphs, maybe 3 at the most. The important thing with a story is that you are taking this time to back up your belief with a personal example. Okay, so you really want to take this moment to connect your belief with something that you have experienced. Okay, this is where these speeches really take their unique form and their unique expression. If there isn't a personal connection, then they tend to be pretty bland and uninteresting, and not very captivating for the audience, and really they don't operate so much as This I Believe speeches. Okay, if you are struggling to come up with a particular belief when we get to actually writing your This I Believe speeches, try thinking about things in reverse. Okay, begin with a memory or a story that you hold dear of a moment in your life where something pivotal happened, where something important took place, and think about how that moment and how that experience changed you and how it caused you to maybe view yourself or your life differently. And if you start maybe from that backwards vantage point, you can come to that belief a little bit more easily. So let's take a look at this sample really fast, and then we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards.
5 years ago, a dress broke the internet. For days, social media talked about little else. What color was the dress? Was it white and gold or blue and black? People were losing their minds over it. How could the exact same picture be viewed so differently? Even worse, some of the same people who saw the photograph as white and gold one day were dismayed to find that it was blue and black the very next time they looked. What in the world was going on? And what was the actual color of the dress? The dress, according to those who stood in the very same room with it, was actually blue and black. Through a series of polls, it was discovered that the amount of time a person spent in sunlight determined how much the person assumed light and shadows. Morning, day people saw the dress as white and gold because they mentally subtracted short wavelength light. It's all very complicated, but the point is that after days and days of hysterical comments, not so scientific polls and memes and jokes, the dress still and always was the very same color it was when the picture was taken, blue and black. There was a right answer and a wrong answer to the question of its color, no matter how people's perceptions said otherwise. Absolute truth exists.
So, this right here, this story part of this speech, is exactly why this particular speech is just okay. It's not really excellent because this particular author, while she's given an example that is really good and is very relevant to her belief, it's not personal. So I, as her audience, am listening to what she's saying, and I'm saying, yeah, that it makes sense, but how did you personally arrive at this belief through this particular experience? It would have been much stronger if she had talked about her own experience with this dress and how it caused her to come to this conclusion about there being such a thing as absolute truths. But because that was lacking, it kind of just made her overall speech a little bit generic and a little bit bland. So this is where I'm saying I really want you to connect your belief to something personal. This is where the power really comes into these speeches. And it makes sense, right? When we hear stories, we believe them and we are inspired by them because of the personal connections, not because they've pulled these generic examples from other people or from trends and related to them to something that they believe. It comes from that personal connection. So make sure that you are really emphasizing that when you share your story. Now, the third thing is really looking at the impact. Okay, and in this section, it's not super long, but it's another critical one because you're connecting your belief with your experience and explaining really answering two very important questions. The first one is, what does this belief say about me? Okay, what does it say about me as a person? And secondly, how does this belief affect the way that I live? Okay, if we believe something and we truly believe it, we're going to live it out, right? We're going to walk it out. People will see you living that way in your daily life, and they'll be able to say, yeah, I can see that that's something that person really believes. So how does it impact you in terms of your actions, your thinking, your decision making? That's where you want to explain that in that impact section. Okay, so let's again take a look at the sample essay before we get to the conclusion.
But why does it matter? What is the big deal if some want to say that they see things one way and some want to say that they see things another way? Why can't everybody be right? And why does it drive me crazy when people say that it's true for you but not for me? I think it is because I love the truth. The truth sets me free to be able to measure my actions against what is reality instead of what is delusion. It's like the difference between building your house on a foundation of sand versus a foundation of rock. Perceptions might shift and slide, but when something is true, it never changes. It just is. And once I find it, I can make my decisions from.
Last but not least, conclusion. As with most conclusions, you want to restate that thesis. So you're going to restate your belief, and then you want to sum it up with why it matters to you. Okay, this is where you really show your passion and get your audience excited about the passion. Again, the goal with these is not to change people's opinions, but to kind of share in that experience with you and to really understand and relate and see that makes sense now. Now I get why this is so crucial to this individual or why they believe so passionately about that, even if it's not something that I necessarily believe. But I can come to a place of appreciation because you have told us why it matters to you. Okay, so let's wrap things up by looking at the sample essay.
Absolute truth does exist, whether we can know it in a moment or not. Even if people might not be able to access the answers immediately or even in this life, that doesn't mean there isn't one. Truth is truth no matter what people think, and when you find it, you can stop looking. There's a comfort.
All right, so now you've got the general structure overview. You kind of get how these things work and operate. And now moving forward from here, this is what you're going to do for the rest of this week is take a look at multiple examples of this I believe speeches and analyze them for these components. See if you can isolate them, figure them out, look at how they're put together, draw inspiration from them, see where they're strong and maybe where they're lacking, so that when we go into writing your own This I Believe speeches next week, you'll know exactly how to approach it and what you need to do to make yours strong. Okay? Hopefully this helps. Again, I think the structure is really pretty easy and straightforward. Have fun reading them. I hope that you find some that are really inspiring and interesting. And I am so looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with as we move into constructing your own speeches next week. I'll see you guys soon.